Hey everybody, my name's Corey. This year, my wife and I are through hiking the Pacific Crest Trail. On this side of the trail though, I have a private practice in the physical rehab space, so physical therapy. I've put up some videos here and there talking about different rehab topics, health and fitness kind of topics, and I put out a feeler a little while back going what kind of topics are you guys interested in? And I had a few people want my input on shoes. And this is something that I always feel a little bit reticent about because it is actually a big professional soapbox / really important topic for me, but it's a really dogmatic topic in the hiking world. Because really we kind of have two main types of footwear. Hiking boots, the old traditional style, rigid, often high-ankled shoes, and then trail runners, often between something like zero drop ultras and something that's just a more traditional trail runner like a Sullivan or something like that. And so there's kind of a place for both, kind of. And so my general foot / shoe spiel to start with is probably a good place to start, which is that over the centuries we've gotten to making shoes that are shoe-shaped, not foot-shaped. And what that means is that your shoe should give padding to your foot so that you're not stepping on sharp things, or if you're doing really long distances, it helps reduce some of the impact on your feet. But otherwise, they should not restrict your foot in any way, nor your ankle in any way. It's really what happens when you start doing that is this largely dynamic, full range of motion foot and ankle starts being able to, well, it restricts the range of motion. It can't actually move as much as it should, which means you have to put more force on smaller parts or fewer parts and a smaller range of movement. So instead of distributing the force of walking, running, whatever movement you're doing along a wider area, it goes on a smaller area, whether literally or a little bit more figuratively, which means you just don't get to distribute the work as much, so it just wears you down faster. That's the simplest way to put it. And so, to start with, when I talk shoes, I want someone's toes to be the widest part of their foot, which means if their toe box is narrow, which any normal shoe is, they can't actually have their toes wide, which means a bunch of things that I won't go fully into, but the outside two toes are like an outrigger. They're supposed to help balance your foot, not really bear load, but give you balance. Your big toe, you're not pushing with it, but as you go over, when you step, it gives you a pivot to go off of. So you mechanically need your toes to be wide to do that. If they're jammed in, can't really go over that. You have poor balance. Oftentimes, it contributes to rotating the foot, and in a similar fashion, arch support is stupid. I'm just going to say it. Your foot naturally has an arch, and anytime someone's like, oh, well, I have flat arches or collapsed arches, or it's been that way since I've been a kid, yes and no. It may have something that changed in you early on, but your arch is created by your muscles in the foot doing what they're supposed to, which then support and are supported by ligaments. And those are all dynamic things. Your bones aren't fallen arches bones. That said, a whole lifetime spent wearing shoe-shaped shoes instead of foot-shaped shoes does mean that you will have slightly different shapes and features to your bones, but it's the more minor part. What I'm saying is that an arch, even if it's been flat since you were 5 years old to your knowledge, we can fix that, and inserts are never the solution. Arches are never the solution. Because that really is kind of the equivalent of going, well, my legs are weak, they're tired, I need to use a wheelchair. Well, as soon as you use a wheelchair, that's not strengthening your legs, it's making the problem worse, and the same goes for arches. It's holding the position, but not only is it not fixing the problem, it's showing your body it doesn't have to make its own arch. It restricts the motion, because a normal footstep starts like this, well, depending on kind of how you're trained to walk, but as Westerners, most of us have a heel strike first. You're like this, you land, you flatten, and the arch goes out, you go over the toe, and so it kind of makes this motion. If you have an arch, you can't flatten. You can't. And so to get the same motion, especially if that big toe is jammed in, it essentially has to rotate and let you go through. This motion is loosely called pronation. And we, across the lay to professional community, have this weird fear of pronation. We say people over-pronate, and the honest fact is most people are under-pronating. They're not able to, so the body has to do something else. And if you have an arch support in there, you can't pronate, so you couldn't possibly over-pronate. It's literally blocked from you, and the majority of the ways that matter. So I won't go too crazy technical like this for the rest of the video, but it's an important bit. That's kind of the most complicated part, but in a similar fashion, most shoes have a toe lift and a heel lift, which stop you from being able to use your foot and ankle through a full range as well as naturally actually do gait, normal walking, let alone it stops your glute and the rest of the hip from being able to work properly, etc., etc. It's a clusterfuck, to be honest. And that's how natural, normal shoes are. Sorry, not natural, but our normal shoes that we sell and wear. And it's a big problem, it's just that people are used to them. A lot of people can't walk around the house without shoes on because it's too uncomfortable, because they're so used to all that strata holding them in that once their feet are left to their own devices, it hurts, because that's what all they've been doing their whole life. So, my short bit is that most shoes are really bad. Your Nikes, your Adidas, even your Salomons, even though those are a little bit better, are restricting your foot's range of motion, holding in a unnatural position that doesn't just mess with the foot, it messes with the ankle, the knee, the hip, the back, and it's just a bad thing. And so, naturally, I do support the ultra most out of all our thru hiking shoes, just for straight up foot health, let alone when you go to something so aggressive like a hiking boot. It's rigid. It's really, really rigid almost every single time. If you get a high top, you're restricting the ankle and dramatically compounding the problem. And so imagine not just walking day-to-day life, but say 20 to 30 miles a day like a thru hiker would. You're taking this huge amount of load and putting it on even fewer places. Not only does it, well, I won't get into those details. Let's say it's a much more thorough problem than I'm even talking about, but it's putting a lot of work, a lot of wear on fewer and fewer places, fewer ranges of motion, and it leads to a much greater chance of repetitive injuries and even potentially acute injuries. People will say, but what about ankle protection? Well, if you lock down your ankle all the time, then it doesn't have the motor control or the strength and endurance to be able to protect itself when there is a slip or a slide or something like that, to minimize a rolled ankle. Whereas I've seen some truly horrific injuries come from people couldn't actually get the full range of motion to not just avoid an injury, but getting their foot and ankle locked in positions that, let's just say, led to really horrible injuries up through their shins and knees, because we need to be able to actually move and dampen. So I could get stuck in this kind of detail forever, but what it comes down to is that if you want to be able to just have a healthy foot, ankle, and above movement anyway, a much more foot-shaped shoe is really important. And when it comes to the thru hiking world, our biggest option is an Ultra. There's some other stuff out there, and in daily life, to most people, I suggest an Ultra because it has some padding, but it has almost all the elements I'm looking for. It does still have some arch, it has a tiny toe lift, but it's much closer to a natural shoe. And it's either this June or July, Ultra is coming out with actually a wider version, because frankly, I have to go up like 3 sizes to get some Ultras to fit my feet, depending on the model, because my feet are just that wide now, especially because I spend a lot of time barefoot, so I have a much more natural foot than most people are going to. So, a few big parts to, I mean, for those who haven't gotten so angry they've shut the video off already. Well, important thing is transitioning. I never buy new Ultras because I get them all used, because almost everyone who tries them on goes and walks a few miles or a day or two, or often does a single run for a few miles, and they go, oh, that really hurt my feet, they're horrible for me, I couldn't possibly wear these are bad for me, what are people talking about? At the very least, they're bad for me. No, probably not. What it is that you've been wearing a shoe-shaped shoe your whole life, and you just tried a foot-shaped shoe for the first time, so it's putting the force in different areas, it's not used to dealing with it, it's changing entirely how you walk, your opportunities to move. And you went and did something high threshold like a hike or a run or something like that. And I'm not meaning this to be accusatory as in you, it's just something that happens a lot, which means I get to go and get some shoes that have under 10 miles on them for half price. And so that's just how I buy my ultras. Great for me, but what it means is that a lot of people don't just do that before the trail. A lot of people will go out and trail and start with a zero drop, more natural shoe, wide toe box, etc. And they're not used to having that. The first time I switched to an ultra hiking shoe, I tried it for about 2 weeks before. I was like, I can't wear these. These won't work. These won't work. They're huge. I'm swimming. And then it was like, oh. And I haven't looked back, and it's been like 5 years, and they're so comfortable. And it's cut out a lot of my foot problems and whatnot by just letting my foot actually distribute force and move naturally. It's helped with other issues, and it's helped a lot of my patients, other people around me. But you have to transition, which means I highly suggest, if you haven't been wearing ultras and zero drop stuff for a long time, to try them before trails. Slowly start using them. Use them around the house and start using them for some of your work day, and then start trying them some of your hikes. But take a few weeks to transition into it. Don't go 0 to 100. If you don't transition, you're not going to have a good time. And if it's like a week from trail and you're watching this video and considering, ooh, I'm not, you could go either way. Because ultimately I'd love to see in a zero drop ultra basically, but the transition's hard, and doing it on trail is a risky thing in a fashion. So another main point is that if you're just die-hard, hiking boots work for me, that's what I want to use, you know, I'm not going to tell you not to. I professionally know there's a better option, but if it's what you're comfortable with, what you're used to, what works for you, that's the most important thing, really. Any advice I can give from whatever professional background and experience kind of means nothing when it comes to the trail if something is working for you. Something else may work better, but it may take a transition or whatever, but it's just through hiking is so individual to what your body can tolerate, and then you go from there. Which means if you're just like, screw you buddy, I'm wearing my boots, go for it. But if it ends up being a problem, you might want to consider something else. Or after the trail, maybe consider giving this a go, but doing a transition, doing something that gives you some time to actually let your foot adapt to it and not put too much weight on it. Like any other task, if you decided to be like, well, I've taken 6 months of med school, I'm ready to be a doctor, it's gonna go badly. And it's the same with everything else, let alone something where your body has to adjust. If you went from doing nature walks to doing 3 months into a thru hike where you're doing 30 miles a day, yeah, you know, I don't have to give more examples. So to show a couple physical examples, this is my day ultra. Just the flexibility, it lets me really distribute so well. The toe box is pretty big without looking quite comically huge. There is a little bit of an arch support on the inside. You probably can't see that, and it looks kind of worn down anyway at this point, so it probably doesn't look too nice. You can see there is a little bit of structure in there as far as an arch, but it's pretty minimal. I'd like it to be less so, but it's hard finding a shoe that I find perfect, and this is pretty close. This is a ultra superior, so it's the more minimal padding through hike shoe, the Trail Runner. This I wouldn't wear on a trail just because you're walking so many miles, you want some padding. Not this little, but you can see decently wide toe box and the other similar construction to this. Love these things for my local hikes, especially with less padding to toughen my feet up more. They just won't make it on trail. Now the Lone Peak is what's most popular because it's a good medium padding. It has quite a bit. They have the Olympus and I think the Torin models, which are much heavier in the padding. I think the Olympus is the street running shoe and the Torin maybe the Trail Runner. I can't recall. But these are really your good bet because it has a good amount of padding. The lugs, the grip is really good. These probably have about, I don't know, maybe 400 miles on them, so you can see there's pretty substantial loss of the lug grip here, but still enough that they actually work. You will see that ultras do tend to have some of the mesh tear early, but the function still works perfectly fine. They just end up looking worse for wear before they actually have a problem. There you can see one with kind of 100 miles or less of wear, and so there's a lot more of the lugs. Most of these, depending on how you walk, your load on them, most people get 500 to 700 miles out of an Ultra, usually 5 to 6, some 400 or under, and I'm like, what are you doing to get that little? So it does require more replacements than a boot, but it's just going to be better for your feet. So I could probably go on and on about these topics. Some people would be like, but you know, water gets through them instantly. Well, yeah, but if you get a boot wet, it's wet for a long time. Basically, you're a full through hike unless you can put them out in the sun in the desert for a day. And so it's just air out your shoes as often as you can. Take a good break, like once an hour, just for a few minutes. Take your shoes off, let them air out. Even if it's cold, it's a good idea, as much as it may be unpleasant, just to keep your foot healthy and keep the shoe not moldy, let's say. Not that you'll be able to tell the difference from the smell. But either way, that's really my quick rundown, is that if you're dead pants out on boots, so be it. If you really want Solomon's, not something else, so be it. Ultras are my biggest suggestion. That's why you're going to want a break-in period, not from 0 to 100, just to get the best experience and give yourself the best chance. And that's the reasons why. I'm just kind of rambling at this point, so I'm going to move on. But I highly am open to ask questions. If you just want to argue with me, enjoy. But if you have any questions about what or how or why, feel free. I'm happy to talk about any of these topics from my professional background and position, and do what I can to help you feeling a little bit more ready for the trail and better set to get out there and do it well. So there will be more of these types of videos coming, so like, subscribe, follow along if you're interested. If you have suggestions, questions, or anything you would like me to cover, drop me a line and just let me know, and we'll see what we can do. So I will see some of you guys out there this year, not this coming year, soon. Cheers, see you next time.